Hello and what's up, my friends? It's Thunderbob here, and tonight we're going to be talking about Last Epoch. I've beat the campaign and I've dipped my toes into the endgame, and I thought I would do a follow-up video with my thoughts. I've been playing this pretty casually, splitting my time between the PC and the Steam Deck, and I've really enjoyed my time with it, though it does have a few issues. This is coming from someone who's played the majority of the important action RPGs out there, hundreds of hours in each of the Diablo titles, Grim Dawn, Titan Quest, Torchlight, Path of Exile. Pretty much all the big ones out there I've probably checked out. Now, I haven't played Last Epoch really hardcore at this stage. I'm coming at this from more of a casual perspective. I probably put 50 or so hours into it, which I don't regret, but I think I might be reaching the end of my time with this game. And I want to talk about why. Okay, to start with, let's talk about what actually works here. I think largely the gameplay systems are pretty great. The itemization system works well. You get enough character information provided that you can generally know what is an upgrade without needing to go and find a guide, scour Reddit or the forums. The available pool of affixes is large, but not overwhelming like something like Diablo 4, which has way too many conditional powers. I also like that the stats actually are very powerful, and like your numbers are generally going to be kind of low, and you're not going to be seeing like hundreds of stat points on your items. Like each point of strength, each point of vitality, each of these main core stats actually makes a pretty meaningful difference on your character. And the rate at which you get upgrades and the way you can augment those items through crafting is pretty well thought out. And there is a very robust crafting system here. You can just drop an item in here, and it'll show you all of the current prefixes and suffixes on that item. You can upgrade those through shards that you collect. You can also modify the item. You can like turn it into a unique item. There's just a ton of ways to interact and upgrade these items as you're progressing. It's a fun way while you're leveling, and especially in the end game as you're trying to perfect and min-max your character. And essentially, there are rare and exalted items that are just kind of like randomized stats on your items. There's also set items and uniques. Uniques have like special properties that won't be available on any other type of items. And set are kind of the same thing, except it has these bonuses if you collect multiple pieces of the same set. This should all make sense if you've played action RPGs in the last 20 years. You also have idols, which are basically like the charm system from Diablo 2. They give you like an idol bag instead of having to fill your inventory with them, which is nice. And these make a pretty big difference on your character. Actually, let's run over here and like I found a ton of these things. You will find so many. Stash is actually really, really useful. You could basically infinitely make this larger as you need. You can also add labels to these. So you could have like one stash tab that has a bunch of labels on here. Here is, this type of item, that type of item. The stash system and the loot system here, it's very, very intuitive, works really well. And I will say, you will find a lot of loot in this game. Like, there are moments where I jump into one of the endgame monolith runs, and there's a chest, like, right off the bat. I click it, and there's enough rares that drop that completely fill up my inventory. So very, very quickly, you'll learn that you don't need to pick up every rare. They're not worth a lot of gold. You can't really break them down for the most part. Like, there are maybe some ways to do that, but you're not, for the most part, going to be picking up every item. To do that, it's only with specific affixes you're looking for. One thing that's nice is they have a built-in loot filter, and you can come in here and you can manage your loot filter. It's also possible to export loot filters, or to actually import a loot filter. Like if I click on this, I can go in here and I can actually get a loot filter that I've copied, like that someone else has put together. Very simply, very useful as you reach the end game, and like in that run, that 1,000 rare and exalted and uniques that are dropping, there's maybe 10 in that entire run you actually want to pick up, and it's really overwhelming. But with the loot filter, you don't run into that problem. So overall, I think the item system is really good here. Like when I compare this to the most recent action RPG I put a lot of time into, which is Diablo 4, I think this is a big improvement over the system they have there. A lot of the loot there is just boring, and it's just kind of a pain. Every time you go to town, like, you don't find any single item that's even fun to look at. This harkens back, I think, more to Diablo 2, which is my favorite action RPG of all time, and feels a lot closer to some of those classic systems, with, some modernization to go along with it. Okay, the next really strong point I think this game has going for it is the character customization. There are a ton of ways to customize your particular character. We're going to start by taking a look at the skill system, and your character selection is where that starts. So this is my character. I started a Sentinel. This is actually my second character. I originally started as a Necromancer, and that was offline, and then I restarted when online was working better. So I created a Sentinel, and that's kind of like the base class. And then after you reach a certain point in the campaign, you select a mastery, and I picked the Void Knight mastery. I could have gone Paladin, Forge Knight, and you get basically all of the abilities of your main class, but then each of these masteries have certain abilities unique to them. Now, one thing to point out here is I picked the Void Knight. I put most of my points in there. I could actually put up to this chain here into the other masteries, and I would also get the skills down below, which as I get closer to 100, I will do that. I'll probably pick up Sigil of Hope. But it's like a really, really interesting system. It kind of reminds me a bit of Titan Quest, where you got like this bar at the bottom and it unlocks things and you're getting stats as you level up. And it reminds me a lot of Titan Quest, which is a game I enjoyed a lot. That game also let you pick like a main class and then a secondary, though that game, it was kind of unique in that you had, I think there were like 15 classes in the game. You could pick any one main and then any one secondary, and it kind of mixed them together in a really interesting way. This is kind of like halfway to that. It's a little less complex in that each one only has 3 masteries, but I think it works really well here. And it gives you a huge amount of customization. Like, you can change the way you play so much through these passives. And this is only a part of the customization. Beyond the passives, you also have skills. So I could put any of these on my bar, but more specifically, I want to specialize. And you get to specialize in 5 in particular. So the specialization, I'm going to click on this, and if you haven't played, this is going to like blow your mind, but every single skill in the game has its own custom skill tree. This is, when I originally saw this is what was like, oh, I really want to play this game now. Like, I love the idea. It kind of reminds me of Diablo 3 and their rune system, where you'd pick like, Fireball, and then you could go and you could, apply one of 5 different runes to it and make it, different versions of it. It's like that, times 10 in my mind. And there are some pretty big changes here. Some of them are, simple things like increasing the width of this attack, increasing the leech on it. But some of them, like these ones that have multiple angles on them here instead of a circle, these are pretty big ones. Like, this basically makes Warpath, which is essentially a whirlwind attack, it essentially makes it free, where I can just cast it unlimited, and it basically becomes like my main skill, because I could just cast it. I don't have to worry about mana at all. So it very much changes the way you play the game. It makes it where like it applies a time rod, and it makes it where it does damage in a huge area. It can summon, like some of these, I'm using a Racing Strike, which is like a big slam attack. And I've got it where when I do that slam attack, it generates these void beams that fill up the sky in a really cool way. And I'll show you some footage a little bit later of the actual gameplay here, but like the way it all comes together is really interesting, and it lends to a lot of options for how you want to play your character and build your character. And then lastly, there's blessings. So in the Endgame, in the monoliths, there's a blessing system, which as you complete this endgame activity, which I'm going to go into more detail in a moment, it will give you an option of different buffs. And these are not just in the monoliths, these are permanent buffs. So eventually you will discover tons and tons of blessings here. Each of these different endgame activities will give you more blessing options. I really have only started to kind of touch this endgame activity. And it does allow you to really customize like your character a lot further as you're progressing into the end game. And just about all of these things can be respec'd, with the exception of your initial class and your mastery. These things cannot be respec'd, but you can, for a small gold price, unspend all of these passive points, and you can come in here and you can either respec particular skills, like you can just despecialize the entire skill, or you can remove skill points, and it will actually kind of accelerate you leveling back up. So it's not like a huge penalty, but it does actually like de-level you. Like if I took a point out here, I would have to re-level, though it is generally like a faster process to re-level. So overall, I really like the skill system. There is just a huge amount of variety, a huge amount of ways to customize your character and to build your character the way you want. And I feel like it's a really good compromise, like between a couple of games. Like I'm thinking like Diablo 4 and Path of Exile. I feel like those are the two like diametrically opposed games. Diablo 4 has like dumbed down things to such a degree that I feel like it doesn't really give you enough choices, whereas Path of Exile is almost like a glutton for choices. It gives you so many choices that it is very unapproachable to a newbie. It feels inaccessible. I have tried Path of Exile, and I bounced off of it just because that's the type of game you have to have a guide, and you have to know exactly how you're going to play to really progress in it. And this feels kind of like a middle point. It's definitely less complex than Path of Exile, but it is definitely mechanically more diverse and complex than Diablo 4 in a huge way. So if you're looking for something that's kind of between those two things, this is a good entry point into the action RPG genre, in my opinion. And I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about the endgame system here, which I think is overall pretty good. It consists of a couple things. First, there are random dungeons spread across the game world, which require keys, which you can get through random drops. The more involved endgame system is this monolith system, which I've really only started to play around with. I've finished the first Fall of the Outcast, then I'm starting on the Black Sun. And this is kind of like, it feels a bit like a roguelite game. So it starts you off up at this instability. Like the story here is basically these are alternate timelines that are unstable, and each one is supposed to be like a different event. And if you look here, like you start at the top and imagine like as you complete these, the tree gets bigger and bigger. Initially it was just like these 4 here, and then as I beat this one, it unlocked the next one and the next one and the next one, and I went down. And each time, like if I go down to the bottom here, if I wanted to continue this, I could go here or here, because that's, you know, on this pathway, that's where I'm at this point. And you can actually see each of these has unique modifiers. There's enemy modifiers, there's player modifiers, there's echo rewards, and most of these, like if you kill enough enemies, there's even a bonus that you get. And that stability that they're talking about is this bar at the top. I've already completed it here, but as you push this bar across by completing these individual echoes, it unlocks these quests. There's 3 quests. And to complete this entire Fall of the Outcast version, I have to do the 3 quests, and the third one is going to be a boss. So it's a really unique system. It kind of feels like a natural progression of like the map systems that like Diablo 4 and Path of Exile use, where you get like a random map that drops, and maybe you'll have negative modifiers. Maybe you'll get bonus loot. It'll impact like the level of the enemies. Here's my second one here. And it feels like a natural progression of that. But what I do like about it a lot here is it feels like it gives you a lot of options in the game. Like it gives you a lot of agency in the choices you're making. I think that's the most unique thing about this system as opposed to a lot of other endgame systems. Almost always I've got 3 directions I can go into with different enemy modifiers, with different player modifiers, with different rewards. And it's a lot of fun. This is actually what's keeping me playing after I've beaten the campaign. This is probably the most engaging thing to me. But that's essentially like the endgame activities. You could do dungeons, you can come in and you can do these monoliths. There's not much beyond that, and I kind of wish there were maybe a few other diversions. I don't even know what it would be, like, you know, like Diablo 4 has the world bosses. I don't know if that would be appropriate for this game, but it feels like there should be some third pillar to this. And outside the systems, like the the gameplay is fine. It's not as hard hitting and visceral as some games. Like I think Diablo 3, Diablo 4. While the systems may have their problems, I think the actual gameplay is really visceral, really hard hitting. Here it's fine. It's not the strongest aspect by any means. It's snappy, it's responsive, it works well, especially considering the huge number of playstyles available. And it works either with mouse and keyboard or with a controller. I played this about half and half between the PC mouse and keyboard and using a Steam Deck, and it just works. The controls just picked up right off the bat. I didn't have to customize anything, which is really nice. Though the controls are a little bit funky when it comes to inventory management and your kind of character management. Like interacting with this stuff with the controller could definitely be improved. And I think the graphics are fine, nothing spectacular. Let me zoom in here a little bit. Look at those little bees there. But it's nothing, that's really incredible. It's good for an action RPG that's not Diablo 4. I think Diablo 4 had the money to really improve the look of their game to an extent that I don't think any other action RPG is probably going to match for a while. But it looks well and runs well, even on low-end systems like a Steam Deck. You get like 45 FPS on a Steam Deck, which is pretty awesome. The world, though, and the story, I was maybe a little disappointed in. Like, initially, I was really excited about this story that involved time travel and going between these different eras. And I was really hyped up. Like, when I first booted it up, one of the first things I did is I looked at the world map, and I was just like, wow, that looks amazing. And you go through all these different eras. I wonder how this is all going to work out, how it's all going to come together. And I feel like it's not as cohesive as it could be. In fact, like, I feel like my character is very undefined. Like, a lot of the time these games, your character is just a cipher. It's just, your character is defined by punching things. But I feel like I need a little bit more. Like, I don't really know, who my character is, why they're doing the things they're doing, why are they important to the story. I didn't get a good sense of how these lands were connected or why I was going to them in a lot of cases. And, the world overall just didn't feel as cohesive as it could. One problem is, like, if you go to any of these places and you explore the map and then you go back to town, even if it's just to run to town and sell your items, that map will completely reset. But here, it really just feels like a bunch of waypoints. Like, I could click on any of these, and when I click on it, it's all randomized. How they connect from one zone to another doesn't really make any kind of logical sense. There's not really a good cohesion, not a sense of progression. Like, I'm thinking even like going back to Diablo 1 or 2. Like, if you're playing Diablo 2 in Act 1 and you get to, the catacomb, and you're going deeper and deeper, it all feels connected and makes sense. But sometimes these areas, like the way they're connected, the way they flow from one into another, just doesn't really make a lot of sense. And then also some of them are really underutilized. Like the ancient area looks really cool. Like, look at this map. There should be dinosaurs up the wazoo. I want to fight those whale things over there. As far as I know, there are 2 places you can explore in this entire map, which I'm sure maybe this will be like a future expansion, or as they finish the story, maybe you'll explore this more. But some of these areas are pretty underutilized. Like, for this entire map, there's 15 areas there, there's 14 areas there, there's 5 areas there, and the map feels huge, but the limited, levels within that map kind of make the world feel smaller than this map implies. And I gotta say, like, I mostly enjoyed the story. You know, it's obviously this is a smaller development team than, I'm just gonna say, like, than Blizzard. Blizzard has unlimited funds, basically. So I can't necessarily hold them to that same standard. I think the cinematics were fine for what they are. I think it's awesome that they have as much voice acting that they do. It just really didn't do anything for me. It kind of reminds me of like Torchlight. Torchlight is a game I enjoy. I feel like the gameplay works really well. I think the story doesn't really go anywhere, and I tune it out after a while. I kind of got the same vibe here. Like, I didn't connect with any of the characters. Like, there wasn't a Deckard Cain in this game for me to like root wit for. Like, I didn't really connect with any of the characters in the story. And then the fact that the story is incomplete kind of sucks. Like, there's only 9 chapters, and I believe it's intended to go to 12 eventually. And the ending that is here at chapter 9 is not satisfying at all. Like, it doesn't have like a satisfying conclusion to the arc you're on. It just kind of ends. And I feel like that soured me a little bit. Like, the story is just incomplete. And since it went to 1.0, this isn't early access. I was expecting it to be done. And it's not. And that kind of sucks. And I realize that, like, the story and the world and immersion is probably the last thing that most action RPG players even care about. Like, if the systems are good, if the hitting feels good, that's about 90% of the game for most action RPG players. But I feel like as I've gotten older and my game time is more limited, I look at more than just the game. Like, I need a decent story. I need like a world that I care about. To if I'm gonna sink hundreds of hours into it, especially like if I beat the campaign here, and I'm like, okay, do I want to sink another 30 hours into this, or do I want to go and play through the Elden Ring expansion or something? Like, that's the kind of choices I have at this age, and I probably don't have enough time to do both of those things. The biggest issue, though, that I've had really involves the little bugs and lag issues I've experienced. Keep in mind, I purposefully waited to play for almost 2 weeks until the largest lag issues were resolved and a few patches had dropped. I still occasionally get hiccups and disconnects. It's not unplayable, but it's still a problem. I have stable gigabit internet, and I don't think the issues are on my end. I've also had a ton of little issues with quests and progression. I've completed quests only for the turn-in character to be unresponsive until I leave the game and do the entire quest again. In the Monolith, I've had completed quests and then log off for the night, and when I log back in, all that progress just seems to disappear. The only way that I've been able to actually complete a Monolith is if I complete all 3 quests in one sitting. If I leave before all 3 are done, it doesn't seem to save for me. I don't know what that's about. I've had my character just stop responding or seem to desync from the server, and I have to log out and log back in. These are not isolated issues. If you look on the forums, you'll see tons of similar reports. And this is probably the buggiest non-early access game I have played in a very long time. The game also just feels incomplete with the story ending so abruptly, and these would all be more forgivable if this was still early access, but the game claims to be a 1.0, and I tend to judge a completed game harsher. Overall, though, I enjoyed this game. The game systems are all well thought out and come together really nicely, which for most action RPG players, that's the most important aspect here. The endgame is fun and seems to have a good amount of replay value. The world and story are forgettable to me, but again, for a lot of players, that's just an afterthought, and at a minimum here, it is easily ignored. My biggest issue is definitely with the bugs and the lag, which is the main reason that I'm considering being done with the game. I think for the fact that this is a $35 budget game that competes with the biggest games in the genre is quite admirable. It might not quite match the presentation of those games, but it surely competes in the underlying mechanics and system. I think with a few patches, and especially as the story is completed, that I will revisit and spend a lot more time with this game. But for now, I think I might be setting this aside. Though I do keep saying that night after night that I'm done with this game, and then the next day I turn my Steam Deck on and I put another 2 hours into it, so who knows. I'm going to end the video here, though, so if you enjoyed this, please do feel free to check out some of my other content. I've got a ton of new PC releases, retro games, virtual reality, if you like what I'm doing. Please like, subscribe, drop me a comment with your thoughts, and have a good night, everybody.